Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, or whenever you happen to be listening to this. Welcome to the Film Realist Podcast, the film and TV podcast from a complete nobody that's hopefully for somebody. I am joined today by friend of the show, returning for the new year, Rob Keys of Screenrant.com and other places, but Screenrant's where we know you from.
Oh, thank you. Yes, welcome. Welcome. Thank you for having me back. I hope you had a good holiday, and I'm glad we both have power. Given like we talked in the previous version that we tried to do this of the weather situation, and it is like crazy cold outside. We got so cold here that we canceled our tobogganing plans, which I was sad about. But we still did hot chocolate though, so
That's fun. I had to snow blow the driveway, and then the kids made a snowman, and then we had hot chocolate. I was actually supposed to see Mean Girls was supposed to be a part of this week's episode, but the weather's been so bad this weekend. I was like, I don't want to risk that. So
no, not worth it.
I've not seen it. So if you were looking forward to that review, sorry, it'll be next week. This week's review will be of Echo, the first ever Marvel Spotlight series, which was of course released on Disney Plus on Tuesday, and the finale of Monarch, A Legacy of Monsters. So two different shows. Unlike a film review, there'll be full spoilers. You've had plenty of time to watch both. Timecodes will be listed in the description if you want to jump around and watch the things in different times. So let's start off with Monarch, not Monarch. This is take two. Can you tell everybody it's take two? Echo.
Spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers. Yeah. I mean, they're not marketing it all as a Daredevil continuation.
You and I, we are the only ones we can trust.
So I mentioned this briefly in take one, and we've had this conversation before. You're a fan of the consumer model, which is dump the show all at once, which I'd be very curious to see if Netflix, who used to own all the Netflix Marvel shows, does that with their Stranger Things. I'd be betting that is 2 parts for sure. And so, but Marvel not doing that typically. We usually would get a batch of things, or you would get it weekly, of course, because that keeps subscribers. But with the mysterious production history for this show and the rumors that it was not good, they decided to dump it all at once on a Tuesday, which I thought was going to be like in the morning, and then it wound up being 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Tuesday, which was, again, all of this has been very weird. Although I do really like the poster. I didn't get the one with the ASL, which was a little frustrating, but regardless, the show is out. I have very mixed feelings. I think I'm going to save the Daredevil thing for later. But in general, I thought it was okay. I watched it with my wife, and I said to her that it was a little strange to see brutal violence on a Disney Plus Marvel property. Like, canonically now we know after Screenrant, was it Joe talking to the producers?
Yes,
about the sacred
I think
timeline?
I want to say it was Brad Winderbaum who told us this. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see that clip on all the Screenrant social media. I think I saw it on TikTok. I can't remember, but regardless,
subscribe everywhere.
Subscribe. There we go. Friend of the. I'm not a friend. Well, am I a friend of the site? I'm a friend of people who work on the site.
Most of us know you, I think.
I think so. Yeah. I'm a professional. You guys are the professionals. And so the fact that the Netflix Marvel canon has been officially canonized as sacred. So for anybody who wasn't sure, I'm really hoping Iron Fist isn't, but that's neither here nor there. We don't have time to talk about that. But continuing 2 different storylines is, I thought, was interesting, as obviously this is a continuation of things we've seen from Kingpin in those shows, and then having, obviously, my brain just went to mush, Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio back. Both of them were in other Marvel properties. And continuing mostly where we had the characters in, I almost said Echo, this is Echo, in Hawkeye.
Yep.
A character. And I know we talked about this probably for Secret Invasion, but a lot of the announcements for things being added to the slate seemed very reactionary. And I think Echo, for all of the amazing inclusion, and I think for a lot of people, an introduction into Native American culture, and specifically the connection to nature and your ancestors. And a lot of that, I think, will be a first-time viewing for a lot of people. I know for myself particularly, where I grew up in Ontario, I had no experience with any of the Indigenous culture in Canada at all until I moved more north and then had my eyes open to a lot of different things. I'm now like 40 minutes from a casino, so play responsibly. But in general, I really like it's Alakwa. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. I really like her as Echo, and I think the story that they try to tell is really interesting, and the attempt is clearly present to match whether that's the action specifically of Daredevil and maybe I wouldn't even know Iron Fist. Just Daredevil, I guess. And the storytelling is really interesting, but it feels really edited down, and ultimately it concludes kind of with a whimper, which it didn't leave a sour taste in my mouth at the end, but I just really wish this show had been produced in a time with the Marvel Cinematic Universe when they produced TV the way people were supposed to, and we know with recent in not investigations, but in articles posted by significant sources, Variety had one where they weren't writing show Bibles. Kevin Feige didn't want to have showrunners, which for a lot of people that doesn't matter. But when you want to make good TV, those things are kind of important. And so you have this weird stepchild of a show where anytime we just had Maya talking to her family, I really liked it. And then having actually any stakes or conflict just to seem to be an afterthought. So I know it's a common criticism that we've shared, which is Disney Plus's shows are just fine, if not below average. And it's unfortunate that a show that could have been something so distinct and unique from all the other MCU content in general, that it's just sort of bleh.
Yeah, I'm with you. Look, I think there's a lot of weird things about this show, and you kind of teed that up at the front. But I think Marvel's Echo is a show that is important, tries to do something important, but ends up doing it in the safest way possible. So we have to acknowledge the fact that, yeah, this is a show that finally puts a Native American lead, which we just don't see in any TV shows behind a major studio as a kind of it's not a flagship show, but it is in a way, because this is the Marvel show right now, and that raises it to that level. It's certainly any superheroes, and let alone Marvel, right? So that's cool, but its origins as a production or product is coming out of it's almost like a spin-off of a spin-off. Hawkeye was never really supposed to be a show. It was just they needed big name characters on the streaming service, but like you said, like Marvel TV under Marvel Studios did not function like any sort of TV production. Where, like you said, they had directors running the show, writers were never on set, they didn't have a showrunner, and it didn't work. The industry told them it didn't work. Fans could tell from the quality of the products, and they admitted it didn't work, and now they're reverting back. So and you can follow the trades for more information on that, but it was a mess. But I think what they got out there, despite all of that, and like you said, there were reports that this show was a disaster, that they stopped production. I was told by one person it would never come out, and in my head, I'm like, of course they would never let that happen. There's the brand damage to Marvel on starting this production, promising it, and never releasing it would be devastating. So whatever they did, they retooled it. The fact that it's 5 kind of, I want to say short episodes, because I would expect longer episodes. If it's that short, you know what I mean? I feel like there should be 5 50-minute or 1 hour episodes, but it's not. And you can feel it when you watch the show, even if you binge it, or like you and me, we did it over 2 or 3 days. And I'll preface this by saying I watched the first 3 like months ago, because we did the junket a while ago, and which is also unusual for Marvel. I think part of that is because initially Echo was going to drop almost like the day after Loki ended, right? And it was going to drop all 5, and then it got delayed because they wanted to space out content. Disney Plus does not put out a lot of original content, and so they always space it out, and that's why also, like you said, they do episodic. But you know what? Like I quite enjoyed the Netflix Marvel shows back in the day, and the quote unquote street level heroes. And after Marvel put out a half a dozen or a dozen shows now, I appreciate those Netflix shows even more. because they felt more raw, they felt more real. They put a lot more work into writing characters and developing characters, and they all, some have flaws, some have major flaws, but still, on average, like show to show, like they, it's a higher level of production than what Marvel Studios delivers. Even though Marvel Studios puts 3, 4, 5 times the budget behind some of these things per episode, right? Which is wild. So I like it. I think for the most part, this is kind of a, I don't want to use the word compromise, but it does feel like it fits in the Netflix world, but it also feels like does fit in the Marvel Studios world. It's a safer bet in that way. Like you said, I think some of the leads are great. Maya Lopez is a great character. Henry is a great character. And of course, when in the back 2 episodes, it really becomes like a co-lead show with Vincent D'Onofrio's Wilson Fisk. And I think they did a really good job of fleshing him out even more and showing us more of his background and showing how there's each. It's interesting, the dichotomy between the two, because Fisk is a character we love to hate, but there's things about him we kind of like, or he's so engaging to watch on screen. And when they show Maya's upbringing, we kind of learn why she was who she is with reason when we meet her in Hawkeye, right? And you also understand the flip, because Clint Barton, Hawkeye, the best Avenger, is the best at turning villains or anti-heroes into heroes. That's what he does, man, across the board. But there's kind of a weird, shocking moment when you see Maya as a kid, where she, like, that scene where she knocks down the bird and, like, lies to her mom about it. And it's like, oh, that's so interesting. So her development is interesting, but it feels incomplete. And that goes back to the 5-episode factor. I feel like the show is missing an act in the whole story structure. So, and I'll make a comparison. You mentioned, like, when it's Maya and her family, that's some of the best stuff. I love that stuff. I could have watched more episodes of just that and fleshing out more. Like, her cousin Bonnie is barely in the show, it feels like. I didn't really feel that connection. I felt it when they were kids in the flashbacks, but in the present day, I feel like there should have been a storyline there that never surfaced. And they had a great supporting cast around there. And we should say...
Graham Greene.
That's right.
If you're going to do anything with Indigenous or Native Americans,
he's who's been in everything. I love him in Fall. I think it was I want to say Falling Skies. It wasn't that. It was, goddamn. He's in one of my favorite shows. But anyways, he's a tremendous actor. You saw him even in an episode of Last of Us he showed up in, which is great. But... yeah, you have actors like that who can carry more screen time if there is more story to delve into. But I do kind of understand what they're trying to do, I guess, in that respect. The big thing, though, I think comic readers will find... I'm curious what comic readers would think, is the change in her powers. In the comics, she's not necessarily super powered. She's just incredibly talented and hardworking. But she does have like a photographic memory, and some people make the comparison to Taskmaster, where she can watch you do something and do it perfectly. That's a bit much, but I almost was expecting a down-to-earth version of that. But I'm of two minds. I would have preferred that, because I felt like they went, you don't need everybody to be a superhero. But then when I think back to the street-level heroes, and the main 4 over at Netflix, I'm like, oh yeah, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Iron Man.
They all have a little.
They all have superpowers. I'm like, yeah, it kind of makes sense, whatever. And it does play very strongly, to their credit, into the theme of family and the name Echo, how it's like echoes of generations. I mean, that's kind of cool. I get it. It's just, I think it was really dampened by like the final fight sequence of sorts when the family kind of shows up and they're fighting. It's just so goofy, and action across the board was subpar for me. And I wish, like, if this is a street level action heavy show, I wish Marvel put more into that. Just brought in more teams, spend more time on that. Because like Miss Marvel, you have such a strong family element you can do more with. And then the other stuff, whether it's the villains or whatever, it's like you just drop the ball and it becomes not good enough. But the other part of the show, the other elements counterbalance that. And to me, it's watchable, but it's not a must-watch, and that goes to that's intentional. It's a Marvel Spotlight show. It's a standalone thing. But if you do care about the future of the MCU and the street-level stuff, Fisk has a big role to play, and this show shows more of that, but also sets him up and changes him by the end of the show, which is, I don't know if you want to talk about that, but the mid-credit scene is pretty wild.
Post-credit scene, it addresses something that's sort of been in the rumblings in terms of, like, Marvel Twitter, which is he's going to be the Thanos of the street level and like running for mayor. Anytime a supervillain is running for mayor or president, that's some of my favorite storylines, like when Lex Luthor ran for president in the early 2000s of DC's era and actually did wind up winning. And so that I'm really looking forward to. I guess I should bring it up because I brought it up in our take 1 of this, which is something that I appreciate is character continuity and also how that applies to their costume. Obviously, a lot of the times they change in the more family-friendly stuff because then you can make more toys. This stuff sells tons of brands or tons of merch. Look at Ninja Turtles. It made $1 billion in sales, and they greenlight a sequel that wasn't even financially successful in its own right. And so with Daredevil, the last time we saw Charlie Cox canonically, I guess it would have been what, 2015, 2016. He was back in the Man Without Fear, like black costume when he had finally beaten Wilson Fisk at the end, because Bullseye had been pretending to be him. And then the next time canonically we had seen him, I guess there's a retcon in this, which was in the red and gold suit, which I had theorized was because Bullseye had ruined the aesthetic of the full red, and then it's been confirmed he's in the red suit, which in the flashbacks to this, and I really liked the first episode, I think is my favorite, because even though it was covering things we had seen before, there was much more context to that stuff, which I really appreciated. And then the actor who played her father, I want to say
Zahn McLaren.
McLaren.
He's an incredible actor.
Yeah, he was amazing also in Castlevania Nocturne. So
he's one of the voice actors in that.
Oh. He is. He plays the lead villain, and it's amazing.
I like how he showed up in Westworld. Sorry to deviate, but he has like a randomly great part in that too. But anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
He is great in Westworld. And so we have Daredevil switching back and forth, and like I was joking with Nelina, I guess one is for like, I'm on the gritty streets of New York. I need my angry red suit. I'm going to LA. I gotta be snazzy. I gotta wear the gold suit.
Yeah. Well, they tied it in with the costume designer, because that was a big part of that show of She-Hulk's journey, I guess. And they kind of, the LA more colorful. Yeah. You know what I mean? But
I guess with this having the Marvel Studios backing, like obviously She-Hulk being what it was, I think it probably led to, we don't have time to redesign a suit, like a full suit for him. Let's just spray paint a version of the Deadpool suit. And then, or Deadpool, the Daredevil suit from Netflix.
Yeah.
I'm tired. And I was really hoping, particularly with what we're going to get from Daredevil in, is it Born Again? Born Again. That we get something more in line with the comics, where it's like cargo pants and then a more like skin tight upper body, because the Netflix suit looked budget when we got it 9 years ago. So I'm hoping that's the case. I think it's really interesting how they presented a lot of the, I can't remember the specific name, but I should have looked this up.
Choctaw Nation?
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. And the fact that you have these two shows on Disney Plus that are really different versions of this, where I think if you were really curious on watching something that is just unequivocally all about Oklahoma, I would recommend Reservation Dogs. It's fantastic.
Is the girl plays Bonnie in that?
I think so.
I forget her name. Yeah, because I think she was. Her name was in the news because she was.
Yeah, she is. Yeah.
She was quoted on really disliking Killers of a Flower Moon, and she's friends with Lily Gladstone because of how they depict. I haven't seen the movie myself, but there's a lot of visual graphic violence against Native American women in that, and I think that actress was vocal, saying we don't need to keep showing that and you know what I mean, dehumanize us in a way. So, but I knew she was from Reservation Dogs because of that. I have not seen that, but apparently it's amazing.
Well, and one thing that was kind of interesting that I had a conversation with Nelina about, I don't know if I did this already, my wife, but a lot of the cast for this are actually Canadian actors.
Yeah.
Which, don't look into the history books as to why, but it was interesting to see talent that had been in a lot of other Canadian content. Obviously, we talked about Graham Greene. I really wish this had been a 10-episode series. The length of the Netflix shows, ironically, was always a conversation topic, like 6 or 8 or 10 or 13, sometimes maybe 0 if you're Iron Fist. But like we talked about, when it came to handling the Choctaw ancestors, how that connected the familial connections that each of them had, the abilities, particularly the one with the mom. And I liked how Maya, as you mentioned, was this flawed character. Like, we see her liking the violence when she sees Kingpin beat up the ice cream guy who doesn't speak ASL, like that's his fault. Not to mention Kingpin, and I'm glad Maya points this out, you didn't bother to learn ASL for the 20 years you had this girl. But her kicking the ice cream guy and then seeing the elements with the bird and her getting, but being a child of violence, like this is the world she's lived in, and that it's her family when she goes back to Oklahoma to kind of pull her out of that. I loved that her grandmother made her costume. I think that's really cool, particularly all the different Easter eggs and elements we see in that. Biscuit, probably my favorite character of the show, because he was like Marvel's Turtle from Entourage.
Ah, that's a good comparison, yeah.
Yeah, I think the fun of this is really good, but the stakes being presented as really high and then ultimately kind of leading to nothing.
Yes.
That, for me, was the most disappointing part.
Yeah, well, I think that's it. I think that speaks to what I was trying to say, too. I think the personal journey there is cut in half, along with, some of the side characters in the family. So it's a shame because they could have done more of that before getting to Fisk, or have Fisk in the background more, because like Fisk kind of shows up after episode 3 and you're like, oh, it's a whole new show for the final 2 episodes almost, and we'll just forget everything that came before a little bit. I don't know, it's too compact where there's pieces missing. It's a bit of a hack job, but they did a better than expected job, I think, of piecing together what they had. I have a feeling this was supposed to be like 8 or 10 episodes, like you're saying, and it's just they gave us half of that because they couldn't make a new show. I'm curious how much of that. But yeah, I was leading to this, but I didn't finish my thought. We talked about the Choctaw Nation. So Marvel Studios worked in conjunction with members of the Choctaw Nation to ensure the authenticity of this and make sure there's like approval. It's all above board. I love that. I love the push towards authenticity and respecting the people involved and the people that the show is really focusing on. It's Native American depiction on TV is almost non-existent sometimes and awfully not done without respect. So that's a big nod to Marvel Studios for pushing through and making that happen. But the other part of it too is like you mentioned ASL. It's like that's a huge thing too, and to do both at the same time is very impressive to me. And I also love the story that all the crew members took ASL classes on Zoom. So the first day Alakwa, forgive me, came on set, crew members were saying, good morning, welcome, I'm excited to see you, I'm happy to work with you, all in ASL. And, they're learning still, they weren't the best at it, but everyone put in the work, and they cared, and they demonstrated that. And that extra effort by everyone involved, I think, does kind of show through, I think there's a lot of respect to that. So that heightens my respect for the show in a big way. So, because you just don't see that. You just don't see it enough, right? So...
Well, no, and like sincerity covering stuff like this, whether that be the ASL. Well, here's a great example is, and I think a lot of people were rightfully critical of this with, ironically, Inhumans, which was Black Bolt obviously doesn't speak because if he did, everybody would die. And as opposed to just having him speak ASL, they had him do nothing hand gestures. Like, that would have been another opportunity for then one of your leads of a show to be demonstrating that. Like, there were a lot of people who speak ASL.
Yeah, I think that was a show that was thought up, shot, and developed in a matter of days, it feels like.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I'm assuming that was Ike Perlmutter's decision. Anytime something went bad with Marvel prior to, like, 2012, I'm going to say it was Ike Perlmutter.
One of those infamous shows where, like, during the last days of filming, they just randomly invited us, or some press, to go to the set in Hawaii. And I kind of forced one of our guys in it, Joe, you mentioned earlier, to go to Hawaii. And then, like, they had no idea what they were doing. It wasn't organized. And then we were never allowed to run any of it anyways. They just kind of forgot about it. So, what a disaster.
And then it premiered on IMAX. IMAX got to premiere.
Everyone regrets. That show wasn't even fit for ABC television, let alone the big screen. So
I've seen clips of it on YouTube, and it's not even worth $720 on a YouTube video. So.
Have you seen the show? Did you ever watch it?
I watched every episode.
Me too.
Yep. And that's why I'm so happy for oh man, I'm gonna get her name wrong. She played
Serinda Swan from
and she's
Reacher.
Reacher season 2, and she was in the Canadian
I want to say
show.
Mike Moe plays Triton, who's barely in the show, and then he went on to play the Bruce Lee for Quentin Tarantino, right? Isn't that the same actor?
It might be, but I hated that portrayal of Bruce Lee.
I think so did the family. But yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to. Is there a segue from Bruce Lee to Monarch? I don't think so. No. I had a
really.
sound clip, and if we were doing this on Zencaster, it would have played right here.
Ah, well.
All right. So yeah, that's Echo for you. I think it's worth the watch, honestly. If you've been watching all the other Marvel shows, the fact that it is mature does add a flavor you aren't going to see from the other PG-13 content. And there's a valiant effort put in the action scenes, but I think what became abundantly clear, even in watching the Iron Fist, and I don't mean to just be harshing on Iron Fist, but it's pretty public when the effort put into doing the action and stunts to the level that they were done. Some more than others. Jessica Henwick killed it, as to be expected. But the fact that there's, for some reason, I don't want to get into it. There's a CGI Daredevil for him getting up. I don't get it.
Yeah, that was a weird thing. I saw that, yeah.
I don't, and because like everyone talks about how a phenomenal stunt actor Charlie is. I don't know. It's very weird.
This is Marvel Studios' way. Fix it in post. They didn't write that, and they just feel like, oh, well, I didn't after. It's just.
They should just have a blank check given to 8711. Like, hey, we'll take your B team, because like the A team's probably working on John Wick or Highlander or whatever's coming up next. But like, we'll take your B team. What do we actually need to do? To I don't know. It's not. They're not going to do it. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. Who knows?
Well,
just look forward to.
It takes pre-planning. Like you have an action scene, you set it up in advance. You spend weeks and weeks rehearsing, and you set it up. They just don't do that in Marvel Studios. They don't, and they haven't since the Winter Soldier, which is. You just mentioned it, the 87 team. So, and now there's two. There's 87 North and 8711 because David Leitch has his own company and Chad Stahelski has his own company, and they have a real studio. They have a massive crew. They just don't hire guys like that anymore. I don't know why, but
they should hire Brett Chan, who did Warrior, which got canceled, and Netflix make more, please. All right, that was, I guess, a segue from Bruce Lee out of, I don't know, but from what would not be good on ABC TV to premier streaming service TV, which is, it blows my mind consistently how much Apple's like, want one of the best shows on TV. Well, we make them.
Hey, buddy.
And
I don't know if this will get to you. I hope so. Actually, I don't, because it'll probably mean I'm dead.
Leading into Monarch Legacy of Monsters, I have been so hot and cold with this monster universe. Loved 2014, loved Kong Skull Island, hated King of Monsters. I thought Godzilla vs. Kong learned all the wrong lessons from I thought Godzilla versus Kong learned all the wrong lessons from King of Monsters. Famously, you've told podcast listeners that Godzilla's a...
Yeah, he is.
And so...
Team Kong, baby.
Team Kong all the way. He's got a beard now and a big fist.
Oh, God.
So I had heard the positive things. I know you had wanted to talk about it in general because of the positive reception in general to it. And so I went in hesitant, and I have to, it's ironic that I'm talking to you about it. Matt Fraction worked on this. What did he write, Rob? What is he known for?
Oh, man. He likes, he's pretty good about the Best Avenger, I think, isn't he?
There's the segue. I don't know why I didn't have it before from working on a character of Hawkeye.
Yeah, Fraction's one of the two creators of the show, right? Or something.
Yeah, he is, with Chris Black. And so up front, I think the melodrama of the familial relationships at times can be a little too much for me. Yeah. As a setup, I think it's really good. Again, we're in full spoilers, so if you haven't watched it yet, duck out. But in general, getting an interesting backstory to Monarch, I thought was really cool, and I was hoping there would be a little more connective tissue to the first episode, particularly where we see John Goodman, and that doesn't actually connect to anything for the remainder of what I'm hoping is just season 1. But having this be this reminded me a lot of what I like, and I know I'm jumping all over the place, so I apologize, of what I liked about the Star Wars Clone Wars and Rebels, where we're getting a lot more detail that does, in my mind, enhance things that we know are going to happen. It made it abundantly clear to me, and before we started recording, I was actually kind of skimming through King of Monsters because I've seen it once. I hated it. But there are details and things they're teasing that I couldn't remember the significance. And so the fact that I'm willing makes it sound like it's punishment, but I want to go back and revisit those movies to connect to everything. And even in I think it's episode, I should look this up. I have the wiki here. Whenever they do the bomb in 54, episode 3, where we see them attempt to blow up Godzilla, like that was an element that was shown in the very first film in this universe 10 years ago. Yeah. And the way that they weave all those things together, I think having both Russells play the same character at different times in his life was really compelling, and I like that happens. Particularly with Kate, May, and Kentaro, I thought they were really good as leads, and them having this, like... So, if you haven't watched the show, them being half-siblings, essentially their dad had 2 different families. One living in Japan, one living in San Francisco, and Kate being a survivor of what they call as G-Day in the first Godzilla, and the trauma that she's dealing with from that event. I think getting to actually explore the consequences of what happened in the first film with compelling characters is something this universe has failed to do for a decade.
Yeah.
And that's what I watched the first 3 episodes in the weekly release, and then I watched the remaining 7 today. And could not wait to keep going through the episodes. And the fact that this is a streaming show that has better visual effects than all the other MCU shows put together on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
Like locations, there's obviously some green screen here and there, depending on, we're on the top of a mountain. Well, you probably didn't actually go there, but going to real places and getting to actually get to see the scale of these creatures, Titans or Motus, depending on what they want to call. I loved this, and the fact that I want more, and I'm actually kind of looking forward to Godzilla X Kong now, says something. Although, where this show ends being prior to Godzilla King of Monsters, I'm actually more happy about, because then I don't have to worry about it being ruined by the movies I don't like.
They gave us... So Apple's very good about screeners. They usually give you everything up front, well in advance. They don't cover all these silly watermarks, and you can watch it in high def, 4K. So it's like the best home viewing screening experience. So props to Apple. Apple, I'll say, also the best home for sci-fi television. So even before Monarch came out, Foundation and For All Mankind, I think 2 of the best premium shows. Anytime anyone says, and you've heard me say this a million times about Marvel and Star Wars production on Disney Plus, everyone gave the excuse that, COVID hindered productions, and that's why these effects are bad. That's why the quality's bad. I'm like, what do you mean? Because Apple has a new season of Foundation and For All Mankind, and I saw Severance, and they have Invasion still going. They had C going at the beginning of that, and they have Constellation coming up, and now they're dropping Monarch. The same time For All Mankind is running, all top-tier sci-fi shows.
Silo.
Silo. Goddamn, one of my favorite show of the year. And these shows are incredible. So what's the excuse? It's because Apple TV does things better. And I say that Monarch is probably the least best of all of these, but it's still better than a lot of the competition is doing. And there are for me, there are highlights and lowlights. So you mentioned some of them. Visual effects, very impressive. And for what ultimately is, I think this is 10 episodes in total, right?
10, yep.
There is a lot of content. It's jam-packed. Many locations, many characters, multiple Titans with big visual effects. Like you said, great sets. You mentioned it's funny you say you called out the nuke, because you see that in the original movie. They try to blow up Godzilla. And I was telling people, I watched this in advance, and I was telling the Screenrant staff, I'm like, you got to watch this. And I was taking notes of all the things we can talk about that connect to the movies and things they're avoiding. And they only gave us the first 7, I want to say. So there's a couple things they intentionally kind of held back until later, which is like going through the Hollow Earth and explaining Kurt Russell's age. I was like, it was really bothering me the first couple episodes. I'm like, wow, how is this guy 90? There's got to be an explanation for it. And they had that weird line where one of the guys from Monarch says, there was a rumor but he went on a mission or something. Something went weird or something. And I'm like, I hope they delve into that. And they did. And I'm not sure I love the explanation, because it doesn't fit with what we see in Godzilla vs. Kong, right? Don't they go to the center of the world?
So this is, it's so funny, because as the show was coming out, I really wanted to do my homework and watch them, like the films beforehand, but I couldn't.
Skarsgård takes him down to the center of the earth, and they see the temple, and they get the weapon, and then they come back, and no time has passed. So it's like, did they just retcon the whole?
They probably did, but I somebody who actually like is a diehard MonsterVerse fan has probably clocked how long, because it's, even if let's use this version's explanation, which is like time is slower, therefore you don't age and whatever, right? Because, and I'm not surprised they kept 8, 9, and 10 from you, because then obviously we see, and I believe it's the end of 8, or it might be the end of 9, that Kikyo is still alive.
Yeah, well,
right?
we don't see any time travel until after that, so we're not aware of any of that. So I think the first one we see is Wyatt Russell come back after his mission. And you're like, oh my god, everyone got older, and that immediately explains the time gap. So you start thinking, oh my gosh, there could be other characters alive hidden here, and that leads to Keiko. But I'm of two minds. These are all positives, and I, like you said, I like the Monarch stuff. I love how it opens up with John Goodman and Skull Island. Like, oh okay, and in my head at the time, they said it like right after Godzilla, so I'm like, oh my gosh, they made this show to ignore the movies now because the movies suck. Like you said, Godzilla 1 was awesome. We all just wanted more monsters, but not in trade or in lieu of having good human characters, which they completely dropped in Godzilla 2 and somehow made even worse in Godzilla vs. Kong, which is to me is a god-awful film, and I'm shocked they made the sequel. And I think the sequel trailer looks terrible as well and goofy as shit. But Kong Skull Island was very strong as well. And even though it's like part of the show, it took me a minute to clock in that Anders Holm is playing young John Goodman, even though his name's Bill Ronda. I didn't even know. I'm like, oh, of course. I'm just, in my head, he's so locked in as the guy from Workaholics. And I listen to their podcast, and I'm like, but just John Goodman? Wait, John Goodman's on the other show on HBO with Adam Devine from Workaholics. I can't figure this out. Like,
The Righteous Gemstones.
Yes, I couldn't compute. I'm like,
who's he talking to? Because that was, again, like, in terms of the timeline.
In the prologue, you mean?
Yeah, so that's 73. At that point in their time, Lee was still trapped in the center of the earth.
Correct. Yeah, he didn't come back
So
yet.
who is he like, sorry, buddy? Like, I thought the show, and I don't know if you had
to his son.
mentality, because, okay, I wasn't sure if it was to his son.
It's got to be that, because Keiko's gone too, right?
But the way that the show presents the information, like the relationship between the three of them, particularly in the first 4, it's like they were maybe some sort of throuple, and then
I thought
he wound up right. He winds up with her, and I'm like, well, who's like it has to be his son. You're right.
Yeah.
But the way
we don't know that though until like episode 6 or something. It's really hard because of the timeline.
Yeah.
So if you're not binging it, how would you remember that? Like,
even at the end of the first episode, when we see Kikyo fall with all the bugs, it's not addressed until episode 9.
Oh, am I saying that wrong? I thought it was Keiko. Is it? How do you pronounce it?
You're right. It is Keiko.
Oh, okay. Maybe before I forget though, I love the casting of the Wyatts. I like the idea of Monarch, but I think it's very goofy and childish writing between like the guy who helps them out and the lead girl. Like, it just felt so cheap, and that felt like ABC TV, where other elements are trying to do more. And honestly, I did not like the leads. I don't like the Kate, May, Kentaro thing. I didn't like
May. I didn't like May at all.
And that's Kiersey Clemens, who's right, and she's generally
great.
good. So I feel like it's a combination of writing and for Kate and Kentaro. I mean, I don't know if it's direction or writing, but I hate to say bad acting, but it gave me the feeling this is bad acting. But it could just be like the way they shot it and directed it. It just felt so cheap, and it's like they're going through these amazing sets and all this stuff, and sometimes they're partnered with, Kurt Russell, and it's like, how did they drop the ball so much? So I say that to say, like, it didn't feel as polished or premium from a character level as all the other Apple sci-fi shows. That the characters were still weak. Knowing in the back of my head, I'm comparing it to like just god awful human characters in the movies, the MonsterVerse movies. So like that automatically makes it better than the films. But it's like you said, it's worth watching. It's not a great show. It has great things about it, and of course, if you love anything about the MonsterVerse, you have to watch it. And if you're like me and realize half that stuff is just terrible, and they should do better, especially if you've seen Godzilla -1. It's gonna be a tough watch, I think. But I mean, you have Kurt Russell and Wyatt Russell playing the same character. I mean, you have to. It's a TV experiment you have to watch.
It's the fact that they do that, and it does, like, I give Wyatt a lot of credit, because Kurt's obviously been doing this for 60 years probably. Because Kurt was like a Disney kid, right? So
yeah.
And so Wyatt doing that, and the thing I liked most about, and we talked about this ironically in Echo, is like having the characters have flaws I think that can be a really hard balance. And at the end of it, even though you give them some justifiable reasons for being unlikable, I found May to just no, I'm sorry, like nothing, like none of the she shows up already mad at Kentaro, and I'm like, okay, fine, they had a relationship, it ended poorly, but then from every point forward, it's like nothing she does redeems her character arc.
No, it's weird, and they try to explain her family part of it, and then she goes back to work for company. We learn it's Apex, and it's like, oh, I hate that part of the movie. So the further we got along, and the more interesting like MonsterVerse part of it all you also get stuck with Apex, which is like bringing us into the Godzilla versus Kong stuff, which is like, I don't like the advanced technology, the goofy tech when they go future. Like, I like the idea of like the weird test capsule they drop down there, but the Hollow Earth theory, and it is what it is. That is the universe now. I just hate it. It's because they did such a bad job with it. You know what I mean? With the
because it comes out of nowhere.
holes.
That's what bothers me most about the evolution of the franchise. Was we went from Monster to other monster to like they're kind of remnants of a prehistoric era, right? Like that's.
But they
the
also
whole
there's things of like there was worshippers and seemingly advanced technology and the weapon. It's like that seems cool in my head. I'm like that's what I love about the beginning of the first Alien vs Predator when they find that temple and it's like a mix of like ancient Mayan technology and ancient Egyptian. You're like wait what? And I love that. And it's like oh actually it was aliens, which explains all this technology. And it's like okay well we know like. You know, Planet X is a big thing in the old movies, in the Toho movies, right? And it's like they have the aliens. I kind of wish they kind of went that direction versus like, oh yeah, Earth doesn't make any sense. It's all portals and it's all empty, and there's no sun down there, but they do have planets, and it's like
King of Monsters. Every monster you wanted to see is now here, and then Godzilla versus Kong. It's like, oh, and we've actually taken King Ghidorah and we made a giant metal Godzilla
robot. That should be movie 10, not movie like
it should.
2.
Well, but that's, I mean, part of the problem was it's ironic because I'm sure you've seen this as well. Like it's been trending over the last probably year or so about like successful shared universes. And I don't think very many people actually know this, which was like the franchise was consistently diminishing returns post Kong Skull Island. Like King of Monsters didn't do well. Godzilla vs. Kong was gonna be the end. And then somehow, its same-day release during COVID, it was financially successful. That's why it's taken 3 years to get anything else from this universe. Was Legendary went, oh, I guess people want more?
I don't know who. Because like to me, it's a downward... Like, I like Kong Skull Island, but I still think Godzilla 1 is the best because it felt like impressive and it felt they had scale and like... It was insane. Like, big props to our boy Gareth, who did it again with the creator. But like, it's just to me, it's a downward trajectory. Every single one is worse, and I can't imagine this one being better than the first two. So I mean, it looks terrible. Like Godzilla's just pink because toys, and it's like Kong has a gauntlet now. Like what? Because he gets his arm cut off, I guess, and they built that in Apex. It's good. No, there's nothing they can do writing wise to make that cool or logical or fun for me personally. So. The movie's already lost me. Now, of course, I'm going to see it, and you and I are probably going to talk about it, but I'd rather have more of these TV shows than that garbo, so...
Well, and the through line with the characters, as we talked about, like, it's not even as if you've been able to track Aaron Taylor Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen from the first one all the way through this universe.
You don't have to. It's not about one character. It could be, like, anthologies type stuff with the bigger overarching thing. Could have been the Monarch of it all, right? So...
but our returning characters for Godzilla X Kong are Rebecca Hall and Brian Tyree Henry. So a podcaster and a Monarch doctor. They're the returning people.
Well, yeah. I mean, the Millie Bobby Brown element that went through Godzilla 2 and Godzilla was just ridiculous. And her father, and it was just terrible. It's such... I cannot believe how bad these movies. Like, yeah, I don't know. And Dan Stevens is the new one, and I like him, but...
He was great in The Guest. Everyone watched The Guest. That's a great movie.
Did you watch, not to change topic, but did you see the trailer for Abigail?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, I have stories to tell you. It's the world at some point about this, but Dan Stevens is in that. Watch the trailer. It's the new horror movie from the guys who did the last two Screams. And it's something wild, man. Like, interesting. So Dan Stevens is in that as well. He's great in it, so... Anyway, like Dan Stevens.
Yeah, I think interesting enough with the pitch of this show was the stuff that I enjoyed the most was probably the more prequel elements, particularly like in the founding of Monarch. I thought that was really cool, and how they avoid 73, I think, is smart, of course, because then we don't need.
No, it's all mentioned through text. They keep saying, "Oh, your dad, Bill, went on a mission, went crazy," and when you meet him in Congo Sky Island, you're like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." He does seem.
No, and you see his wardrobe slowly get closer to what John Goodman's
and you
wearing.
understand why now, because he lost his two partners in life, his best friends, and it's like they did a good job of developing that as like a central character to the lore. So
somebody I actually wanted to see more of, and they don't he comes back as kind of like I'll do this, but obviously I'm broken too because of what I've gone through. But that was Hiroshi,
the father.
Yeah. He's gone for I think 4 episodes.
He barely. I almost thought you're never going to see him again, but he seems like a most interesting character because he knows what's going on, and it's like this lone wolf going around the world trying to do this stuff. So I hope I'd rather see season 2 lean into that, and Russell, and forget the kids, and just take Monarch more seriously. And I hope somehow they can ground the apex of it all because it's just so ridiculous that the technology they end up building. I forget the name of the character we meet from Apex, but that's the actress from The Expanse. Who I love. So she's tremendously talented. I really hope they give her like a real character to play with because she can do anything, I think, in season 2. And I do expect us to get a season 2. It's a nice big flagship brand to have. I think working with Legendary is a smart thing for Apple TV Plus, and they prove they can deliver the production. I just hope they refine the story and God help us how they figure this tying into. If they do a season 2, like what that has to set up is going to be just it's a losing game. But
so as I said before, like when we started, I look at the prequels differently now because we actually got to see Anakin's extended run as a Jedi Knight, and
they explain the character mostly, yeah, for sure.
And so if we build to, I guess my hope is that we go to King, or oh my god, their title's so dumb, Godzilla King of Monsters, right? Because when this ends, because that was 2019, yeah, and so obviously they're Kate and Mai and Kiko, they come back and they're in 2017, so it's been 2 years since when we saw them enter. Do you think Kurt Russell's dead?
No, I think Kurt Russell. No? I think he's the poster character for the next season.
You think so?
Yeah, I think they bring back the ones that matter, and they're going to add another 1 or 2 stars to the show. I would assume.
It would be really interesting, just in terms of like connecting this universe, if we see like who would it be?
Here's the real question. So sorry, finish your thought. I have an additive thing here.
Like the development of what is it called? It's like. Is it Orca? The thing to talk to animals, right? Because that is an element that I'd actually be really interested in seeing.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Right? And this is, like, I watched, like, the first 15 minutes as King of Monsters, so, like, this is the only reason I have this idea, or thought, is because we see, like, the Gamma cell phone, which is what they're using to get to signal Godzilla, like, hey, bae, you up? And so if we get to something, if we have Apex and we know that they're in, again, this is the problem, is you had a completely different villain in King of Monsters because it's Tywin Lannister, right? It's Charles Dance, right? And then they were like, well, we don't have Charles Dance, because I do remember he had Ghidorah's head, and then it's like, oh no, well, we killed them and we stole it. Like, look at how bad the scripts were for the movies, and if you can answer those things in a compelling way, then I might be more likely to revisit them.
That's the problem with the character I just mentioned from Apex. She's like, right away, you can tell she's a mad scientist, hungry for power and money, and it's like, you can tell she's going to do something evil. She's out for no good. And it's like have some nuance to your characters. Like there's not an ounce of motivation or background to that character for her to be that overtly wild from the moment you see her on screen. And it's like, come on, guys.
If she was a dude, she'd be sitting there twirling her mustache as she's trying to hire May.
Oh, no, he'd be in a chair facing the other way, petting a cat and, like, spinning towards you and, like, looking for Inspector Gadget to yell at.
So I hear you're a good hacker.
Yeah. I know, yeah.
That's true. Yeah, it's unfortunate that we get a new movie in this universe in 2 months, and both of us are like, nah.
And here's the thing, because of the timing of that, the biggest plot device they have now is the time travel element, essentially, and it's like that has never been seen in the films, so that has to be reconciled because you can't go down there again and not make sense of that. Because now you have monsters going back and forth, so it can explain why Kong maybe doesn't age if he was down there or whatever. I don't know, but you have to change that. So a monster can go down there for a couple hours and come back, and it's been years or whatever, 2 or 3 years, and like they've learned a lot. They're different now. They're a different creature, so they have to do that with other characters. And the big question I have now is someone from one of these shows or movies has to show up. They have to cross that bridge at some point. Someone from the show should show up in the movie. Now, season 1 doesn't make sense of that enough to have that happen in this movie, but in the next movie, or if they play with the Hollow Earth in this movie, which they are because it's in the trailer, like they have to make sense of that. Otherwise, this show and the movie is just like it's too late now. But I would say just keep them separate. But one more thing, what I loved about the show is like the one almost like X-Files element it had going on, and it was back in the past when you first meet Bill Randa, and he's researching the monsters, and he finds his old boat. Again, that boat, by the way, mentioned in the movie as well. The ship he was on that crashed, whatever. I'm like, that's awesome. I love the idea of them like searching the world. I wish there was more of that. I almost wish the whole show was in the 50s and 60s or something, where like they're just like they heard these local stories and local legends. They talk to natives of all these different lands, and they find these stories about this dragon that flew the skies, or there's this thing, this beast, this yeti that lives in the mountains. They go there, and it's actually a titan or whatever. That I wish they played more of, because that to me is a better show, more interesting, more satisfying. It builds towards something long term versus jumping right into like the apex in technology. Or we're gonna create hovercrafts that can go through portals and. Ugh, what a waste.
Well, even in the beginning of the show for the present, their present, I agree. That was one of the elements I enjoyed the most was the globetrotting and the mystery at hand, like how are we gonna track Dad? Like those are the elements I liked about it.
Yeah.
And then when it fell into the like we're all on different sides, but we need to shake hands because dragon, and it was like this is not like in the center of the earth stuff is not what I liked about the show.
No, it's
ridiculous.
ridiculous.
Like, it was cool to see Kiko back, and she's got like clearly her bow and arrows made out of a bone of some sort.
Yeah, and her clothes are perfect.
But also,
yeah.
It would have been interesting to connect. Like, if it were me, we have Bill Randa around. Like, we should have seen. I guess depending on what assets they have, it would have been cool to see like one of the Skull Island ones, because we're clearly on Skull Island when they come back from the center of the earth, right? Because that's why Kong is there.
They're on. I think so. I think that, I'm pretty sure that's the island they're on for sure.
Right. So like, what if the creature that is trying to kill them in the center of the earth was one of those weird like lizards with no hind legs?
Yeah.
Instead of like some random flying thing.
Yeah.
Right, which again,
I don't know. I'll say this: like, I Godzilla, the whole universe. Like, I'm a big Godzilla fan. Like, my dad made me watch all the OG movies as a kid. So, like, and they are full-on B movies back then. It's very far cry from what Godzilla -1 is, and the modern movies in general. But the whole cast and crew is just, they started promoting this right after the SAG strike ended. But they were very cool. So we did the junket and all this stuff to promote the show, and then. I really want to do like a weekly post-mortem. So because it's a weekly release, every time an episode comes out, I want to talk with someone on the show about the monster that got debuted that week or the big twist that happened that week. And they did it. So we have like one actor talking about that episode every single episode. We drop these exclusives weekly every single week. So I hope to keep doing that. And part of the fun was talking about stuff like that because they made a point of saying there are X amount of new Titans in this series, and but you are right. I do wish there was a little more connectivity to the Skull Island element of it all, even though it's obviously teased at the very end. And I think when we meet Kong in the Godzilla vs. Kong, he's in a protective thing on that island, right? So maybe that's what they're building towards?
He's at some point again, in shared universes, you probably would have seen him again before we saw him in the team up movie.
Yeah,
but he's in they've essentially domed Skull Island.
The whole island, just like a unit for him.
A part of it enough for him, right? And he's also grown. That was one of the big
we knew that because he was so tiny compared to. They really messed up the scale too. Godzilla in the first movie seems bigger than he is in the follow-ups. I feel like, but
he's the biggest, I think, in King of Monsters.
Really, they made him bigger than that. Oh, I just remember. I remember him in number 1, like seeing. his head looking in the windows of a skyscraper. He just seemed like so enormously tall versus what I saw him in the sequels.
Yeah, he is.
It's that famous thing with Optimus Prime. If you watch Transformers 1 with Michael Bay, there's a sequence where Optimus holds Megan Fox and Shia LaBeouf at the same time in their hands, and then you see him in 4 movies later, and he picks up like someone's glasses or something, and his hand is 1/10 the size it was in the first movie. And I'm like, wait a second, how did they screw up the scale so much?
So according to this, he in Godzilla was 355 feet or 108.2 meters tall in Godzilla 2014, and then in King of Monsters and Godzilla vs. Kong, he was 393 feet or 119.8 meters tall.
It's
the
scale. It's the problem with scale.
The scale is it's just you're getting camera shots from above him, and you're like, I don't.
They might as well be people because they nothing feels big in those sequels, and the humans suck. So they failed at every single part of those movies. By the way,
all the same bad lessons of Pacific Rim 2.
I want to fight people, Kyle, who are online saying, "Oh, I just want to see monsters fight." I'm like, you want to see CGI colors and CGI explosions? Because no one gives a shit. That is the worst part of superhero movies and all the Michael Bay movies. The best part is caring why someone's fighting and feeling the impact. None of the sequels do that. So and that's the trailer for the new one. It's like, look, pink colors and more explosions and this and that. And look, they're going to fight together. It's like, this is meaningless because I don't care why they're doing this. Also, the reason they look like that is going to be stupid. So there's nothing to rally for me. I need a little more intelligence and build up and development and character. And I know they can't deliver. You just told me the podcaster's back as one of the leads. And it's like, what? Like, by the way, since I love complaining about characters in this franchise, in the historical scenes in Monarch, the military general who's like the point person,
Puckett?
He's over the top too. He's just so obviously, he's got that look too. He just looks like a slimy military guy.
The guy who takes over for Shaw when he goes to see the Hey You Up Godzilla phone, that guy was like, I just want to slap him. He's just like, you have proven nothing. Like it was just like,
I don't like that.
Okay.
The stunt casting type stuff like that. I just want more nuance and dimensions to my characters. Like this is a smarter the audience subscribing to Apple TV Plus, like, deserve a little more,
It's true. I love Godzilla
writing.
-1. That movie was so good.
Yeah, very cool. Because the whole movie's human. And now my gripes with that is like the main character, and I love how like he's going through all these challenges and personal tragedies. But some of the decisions he makes regarding the kid just drive me crazy. And it's like I don't like that. That doesn't make sense. And it's like you know what I mean? Even in the confines of its story and what this character's going through, I just do not understand some of the decisions being made. And that was the only gripe I had with that movie because it was otherwise pretty tremendous. So. Well, that's a different podcast.
Yeah, that will do it for our Monarch Legacy of Monsters. If you have Apple TV Plus, it is available there. Not at all a sponsor, but if you have PC Optimum, currently they're giving away 3 months of Apple TV Plus. So
nice.
More than enough time to watch that. I'm just letting people know because that's how I watch the show. Because now that Ted Lasso is off, I am more inconsistent with my Apple TV subscribing.
For All My Kind just ended. It ran like alongside this. Great show.
That was a really, really good show.
Yeah.
Jermaine, I'm gonna see how long this episode is after the edit. If it's not too long, I will review Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1. I'm gonna be totally honest. I haven't watched it yet as we're recording, and I'm not looking forward to it. So that depending on how long this edit is, it may be or maybe it'll be a midweek episode. I don't know about that. If you are listening to this podcast because you listened to the Rebel Moon episode that I was fortunate enough to have Stephen Colbert on, which exploded. It's now tripled my most listened to episode.
Wow.
So that was amazing. Yeah. So thank you to everybody who listened on that one. And sorry, Rob, before I let you go, I just have to see if anybody's responded to the questions of the week. And then I guess you can respond to some.
Sure.
One of them was your top 10 of the year. I know you and Podcast X crew, you, Ben, and Kofi reunited this past week for your top 5. So if you want to hear Rob's there. I want to know, Rob, what are your top 3 DCEU films?
Oh.
That was one of the questions.
Top 3. The Suicide Squad by James Gunn.
Okay.
Can I include TV shows or just movies?
Are you going to include Peacemaker?
Yeah. I would, over all the movies, for sure. Let me think here. I think both Justice Leagues didn't work for me. BVS is too problematic as well. The first Suicide Squad's terrible. Birds of Prey I didn't like. The first Shazam's fun. I'd probably put that in my top 3 or 4.
Yeah, that's fair.
Black Adam, Shazam 2, no. Maybe Man of Steel, just because like I really just love the Cavill as Superman part of it, and like there were some really cool things there. What am I missing?
Let's see, what do we got here? Flash.
No.
Aquaman, Wonder Woman, BVS.
No. All these movies
Blue
are bad.
Beetle.
Oh, Blue Beetle, yes. Let's knock out. Yeah. Okay, let's go. Blue Beetle, The Suicide Squad, and Peacemaker.
Okay, interesting. And I know what is your no, that one's weeks old now. Oh, I recently added this because I realized I didn't have one for this. Who's your favorite live-action Spider-Man? I don't actually think I know the answer to this question.
I don't think I do either. Because to be honest, like I never had a bad time with. I was never disappointed in Peter Parker, except for the one exception is Spider-Man 3, like an emo Peter Parker. But that's like Sam Raimi just going on one because he knew he was just, I don't know what he was trying to do. But I love Spider-Man 1 and 2. And I actually love Andrew Garfield. And I was watching that, my wife and I loved that. We loved the Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield on and off screen, everything about them, which is great. And I want to see him back. And I always wanted more. Even when Spidey 3 burned us, I wanted to see Sam Raimi do Spidey 4 with Vulture and whatever, and Anne Hathaway and John Malkovich. I would have been in, you know what I mean? And I wanted to see Mark Webb do Spider-Man 3 and not do like when they try to force in the weird Sinister Six stuff with 2. That ruined everything. But Garfield was amazing. And then Tom Holland.
The Vault of Villains?
Yeah, and Tom. But I did like the idea they were pitching. They were pitching towards like a biotechnological based universe. I kind of liked that. That was a cool take. They just like ruined it with what they did with our boy Dane DeHaan there, and it went over the top right away. And it's like, what a waste. They went too much. They Sam Raimi'd it right in the second movie right off the bat. Not Sam Raimi'd it. Sam Raimi Spider-Man 3'd it, where they tried to force in all these connections and setups for features. And like, no, they forgot what mattered. And then, Tom Holland comes in with Civil War and charms everyone off. So I like them all. I don't know. I am of the mind where Sony every year should have a Spider-Man film with one of those 3 actors as the lead. And they could just cycle one after the other. It can be 3 different universes. And you can take all their weird villain movie choices and just drop them in whatever universe they want. And they just, they could literally build out 3 universes. And then Secret Wars, you could have threw them all together and picked the one you want. You know what I mean? But they didn't. Yeah, that's true. And then whoever's still there would be the mentor for Miles. Boom. There you go. Like
Mine is Andrew.
Love
Mine
Andrew.
is Andrew, and I think for me, what was the hammer in the Andrew is my favorite, and who I think is the best is when he shows up in No Way Home, he steals the movie.
Yeah,
and he's in the movie for like 20 minutes.
Yeah, then be he essentially becomes the comic relief, which is like comic relief Spider-Man in a Spider-Man movie with other Spider-Man. It's like you instantly are the best, right? So, but he was always the cool, funny one of all of them 3, right?
I had this conversation with a friend recently, which was what I actually like most because of the mess that Sony has had in producing the Spider-Man movies. And you're a much more fluent comic book reader than I am. But that the Tobey Maguire films, that's Steve Ditko, that's early 60s Spider-Man.
Yeah,
and then with the Webb Andrew Garfield films, they were I wouldn't say they're ultimate Spider-Man, but they're kind of reminiscent of that early.
The more in line with
stuff.
That, though, certainly thematically they are. I think the vibe.
Yeah, and then Tom Holland's is actually the ultimate Spider-Man, where he's completely engrossed in the rest of the Marvel universe, right? Like in the terrible animated show, but in the Ultimate Comics, right? Being integrated with S.H.I.E.L.D. and whatnot, working with the other heroes, and so you've gotten 3 different versions of that.
Yep.
And my hope would be moving forward, we get some amalgamation of all of those because
I would hope Spider-Man 4, now that they kind of ended with Reset, is more in line with what Garfield's next truly solo film would have been, right? And he's at the right age now, with the right experience, new suit, more ideally grounded, and maybe that's why they set him up to show up. And I would hope And the expectation is we're going to see these Daredevil, Spider-Man, Kingpin crossovers, and that could be part of the street level. Get him out of the Avengers space, supernatural alien shit. Let him be a New Yorker and be local, our local Spidey, like he should be, or a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Let's do some of that, guys. It's been long enough. But, yeah, I mean, I love Garfield. I think Garfield is just, if they were to, I'd be most excited about seeing Garfield as Spider-Man again, I would say. So maybe I'm with you. So
I think Garfield at this current timeline for me fits the most with being Miles' mentor. That's probably an age thing too.
Like 100%. 100%. Yeah.
So if you are listening on Spotify, all the questions that I just threw at Rob, they're embedded in those episodes. If you're listening on Apple, there's no option to do that. Please share the podcast with any of your film listening or film fan friends. Next week's episode will be Mean Girls. Maybe something else. I haven't really decided. January's kind of a hit or miss month. It's typically where movies go to die. But if you have seen some of the films that I covered near the end of the year or the beginning, I've already covered Ferrari, The Color Purple, as well as listed out my top 10 of the year, the Doctor Who Christmas specials, and Rebel Moon, A Child of Fire, and all the DCU stuff that ended 2023. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming up. I am certainly going to be seeing Argyle and Madam Web. Can't wait for some more movies out of the Spum universe. Let's go. This is the Film Realist Podcast. I'm Colin Naranya. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.